The moment I realized we were no longer dealing with annoying neighborhood drama was the moment a woman from our homeowners association, our HOA, walked into my wife's hospital room like she owned the building. She didn't whisper, she didn't hesitate. She leaned in close to Emma's bed and said, "Sign the removal form." Then she pulled something small from her purse, something I didn't even register until the air turned sharp and my wife started coughing like she was drowning on dry land. I'm Ryan Carter, and I'm the kind of guy who lives by receipts, procedures, timelines. Because my whole job is compliance. If something happens, I don't just remember it, I document it. And for a while I honestly thought that would be enough to handle the HOA in Pine Ridge Estates. We moved here because it was quiet. Because Emma needed quiet. She'd been through a rough season, panic attacks, sleepless nights, that feeling like your own chest is a locked door you can't find the key to. So when we found this neighborhood with tree-lined sidewalks and a little community garden path, we thought, finally, a place where she can breathe. There was one small thing that helped her more than any welcome packet ever could. A simple wooden bench near the garden path, an old memorial bench dedicated years ago to a woman who'd lived here before us. Emma would sit there and just stare at the flowers, the pond in the distance, the way the sunlight hit the leaves. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't loud. It was peace. And of course, peace is exactly what the HOA can't stand when it isn't under their control. Her name was Melissa Hart. Mid-40s, perfect blowout, perfect nails, perfect smile that never touched her eyes. She wasn't even the president, she was the vice president of the Pine Ridge Estates Homeowners Association, which somehow made her worse. Presidents at least pretend to be diplomatic. Vice presidents act like they're auditioning for the throne. The first time she approached me, it wasn't with a greeting, it was with a piece of paper. She held it out like a badge and said, "You need to remove the bench by Thursday. It violates our updated aesthetic standards." I glanced at the paper. No official letterhead, no reference number, no meeting date, no vote record, just bold words and a signature line that looked too clean, too convenient. I gave her a polite smile, the kind you give people before you start pulling threads. "Okay," I said. "Show me the board meeting minutes where the revision was approved, and the city filing for any community property changes." Melissa's smile didn't move. "You don't need that. It's internal." I let out this little breath through my nose, half laugh, half disbelief. Internal doesn't mean imaginary. Her eyes narrowed like I'd just insulted her personally by asking for basic governance. "You have 72 hours, she said, and then she walked away like she'd just served a legal summons. That's how it started. Not with shouting, but with that slow, suffocating pressure the HOA knows how to apply. A notice taped to our door, a fine in our mailbox, a warning email that felt like it had been written by someone who got off on punctuation. And Emma, she saw every single one. At first, she tried to shrug it off. "It's just a bench," she'd say, forcing a smile. But I could see it every time another notice came. Her shoulders tightened like she was bracing for impact. The bench wasn't just wood to her. It was a symbol that she could still exist in the world without being hunted down by fear. Melissa didn't care. She started showing up more. Always with someone behind her, another board member or a neighbor who looked uncomfortable like they'd been drafted into a war they didn't believe in. She would point at the bench like it was a rusted car on blocks. "This is an eyesore," she'd say. "It brings down property values." And I'd look around at the manicured lawns and the identical mailboxes and think, no, you just can't stand that something exists here that you didn't authorize. So I did what I do. I documented. I took photos of every notice. I saved every email. I wrote down dates and times. I even recorded one conversation on my phone because where I come from, people who hate accountability always start sweating when you create a timeline. But here's the part I didn't expect. I didn't expect the HOA to go after Emma directly. One afternoon I came home and found her sitting at the kitchen table with a letter in her hands. Her face was pale, eyes watery, like she'd been punched without being touched. "What's wrong?" I asked. She slid the paper to me. Another compliance notice, but this one wasn't about the bench. This one was about her. It said she was creating a public disturbance by frequent lingering and emotional displays near the community garden path. I stared at it so hard my vision blurred. They were fining my wife for sitting quietly on a bench. I felt heat crawl up my neck. "This is insane," I said. Emma swallowed, voice small. Maybe I should stop going there." And that's when I realized what Melissa was doing. It wasn't about wood, it wasn't about aesthetics. It was about power, about forcing someone weaker to fold. That night I sat in bed next to Emma while she stared at the ceiling like sleep was a stranger. And for the first time I thought something that scared me. Maybe I can't win this. Because HOA people don't play fair. They play exhausting. They play relentless. They play death by paperwork. And for a moment, I wondered if I was the problem, if I was being stubborn, if I was turning a simple request into a war. Emma turned her head toward me, eyes glassy. "Ryan, I don't want to be the reason you're fighting everyone." That sentence hit me like a brick. I wanted to say, "You're not the reason," but the truth was, she was the reason I cared this much. And the part that made me feel sick was that I was watching the pressure crush her day by day, and my documentation wasn't stopping it. I almost gave in. I even opened my laptop to draft an email that said we'd remove the bench to make it stop. My fingers hovered over the keys, and then I remembered Emma's face the first time she sat there, how her breathing slowed, how her shoulders unclenched, how she looked like she'd found a tiny island in the middle of a storm. And I thought, if I remove that bench, I'm not keeping the peace. I'm teaching her that bullies get to rewrite reality. So I closed the laptop. I looked at Emma and said, "No, we're not doing that." She blinked. "But what if they keep pushing?" I leaned closer, voice low. Then we pushed back. With the truth. 2 days later, Emma collapsed at home. One second she was standing at the sink. The next, she was sliding down the cabinets, hand clutching her chest. Her breaths came in sharp little bursts, like her body couldn't remember how to be a body. I called 911 with shaking hands. At the hospital, fluorescent lights washed everything into this cold, sterile blur. I sat beside her bed while nurses moved around like ghosts with purpose. I listened to machines beep and watched Emma's eyelids flutter like she was trying to stay tethered to me. And in the middle of all that, my phone buzzed. An email from Melissa Hart. Subject line, final notice, immediate compliance required. I felt something in me snap quietly, cleanly, like a rubber band stretched too far. And then the door opened. Melissa walked in. Not a nurse, not staff, not security. Just Melissa. Heels clicking like she was entering a board meeting, not a hospital room. I stood up so fast my chair scraped the floor. "What are you doing here?" She didn't even look at me at first. She looked at Emma, my wife, like she was a delinquent homeowner who'd missed a payment. "You need to sign the removal form," Melissa said, pulling a clipboard out like she'd been waiting for this moment her whole life. Emma's eyes were half open, unfocused. "What?" I stepped between them. "You are not doing this. This is a hospital." Melissa finally met my eyes, and there was something almost delighted in her expression. "It's still within our community jurisdiction," she said. "Your address is Pine Ridge Estates. That means you're under HOA authority." I stared at her stunned. That's not how anything works. She leaned around me, trying to angle the clipboard toward Emma. "Sign it and this all goes away." That's when I heard Emma's breathing hitch, and something in me went cold. "Get out!" I said, voice shaking, not from fear but from anger. I had never felt this pure. Melissa's smile widened. "If you refuse, the board will take action." I took a step forward. "Melissa, you're out of jurisdiction." For a split second, her face tightened, like she hated being told no more than she hated being questioned. And then her hand dipped into her purse. I didn't even process it at first. I thought she was grabbing her phone. But what she pulled out was a small canister. And before I could say anything, before I could even fully understand, she sprayed it. A sharp hiss, a mist in the air, a chemical bite that slammed into my throat and eyes. Emma jerked, coughing, panicking, eyes watering instantly. She tried to inhale and couldn't, like the air itself had turned against her. "Stop!" I shouted, lunging forward, but my vision blurred as my eyes burned. The room erupted, nurses yelling, monitors beeping faster, someone hitting a button on the wall. And Melissa stepped back like she'd just sprayed bug repellent on a problem. Security burst in within seconds. A nurse shoved me toward the sink, rinsing my eyes, while another tried to calm Emma, oxygen mask going on, chaos spilling across the room like a flood. Melissa started talking fast, too fast. She attacked me. She lied. They threatened me. But here's the thing about hospitals. They have cameras. They have reports. They have staff trained to document everything down to the second. And while my eyes burned and my wife shook in panic, I heard one of the security guards say, "Ma'am, put your hands behind your back." Melissa's voice went shrill. "You can't do, you know who I am." And I almost laughed because that question was the most HOA thing I'd ever heard. Later, when the room calmed and Emma was stable again, a hospital administrator came in with a clipboard of his own. He asked me what happened. I didn't rant, I didn't spiral. I gave him the timeline. I gave him the emails, the notices, the fines, the pattern, and I said one sentence that made his expression harden. She used an HOA dispute to justify assaulting a patient. The next day, something unexpected happened. A man named Daniel Brooks, another board member, showed up. He looked nervous, like he'd been losing sleep. He held a folder so tight his knuckles were white. "I can't do this anymore," he said quietly. He opened the folder and slid papers toward me. Drafted aesthetic revisions with no vote, no minutes, no filing. Melissa's handwriting all over them, like she'd been running the HOA like her personal kingdom. Then he showed me another document, one I hadn't even known existed. A survey request to reclassify part of the community garden area so she could convert it, Daniel said, voice low, into a private event space under a community improvement label. I stared at him. "And the bench," Daniel swallowed. "The bench is in the way. It's proof the space has a memorial designation. It complicates what she's trying to do." My stomach dropped, of course. It was never about property values. It was about profit and control. That night, while Emma slept under medication and exhaustion, I sat in a stiff hospital chair and built a packet. Not an angry email, not a complaint. A case. Timeline. Evidence. Photos. Emails. Witness statement. Hospital incident report. Camera verification. Daniel's documents. I labeled everything. I indexed it. I made it impossible to ignore. And when the HOA scheduled their emergency compliance hearing, I didn't walk in like a homeowner begging for mercy. I walked in like someone bringing a match to a paper empire. The meeting room was packed, neighbors whispering, phones out, eyes wide. Melissa sat at the front table like she still believed she was untouchable, like she thought the hospital incident was just a misunderstanding she could bulldoze with confidence. She started talking first, of course. She called us disruptive. She called the bench unauthorized. She called Emma unstable, like my wife's health crisis was a character flaw. Then she looked at me, smile tight. "Mr. Carter has refused every reasonable request." I stood up slowly, and I didn't yell. I simply said I'd like to submit evidence. Her smile flickered. I handed over the packet. I watched board members flip through pages and go pale. I watched neighbors lean forward, reading fines they'd never known were fake. I watched the HOA attorney's face change the moment he saw the hospital report. Melissa tried to laugh it off. "This is irrelevant. This is emotional." And that's when Daniel stood up. He cleared his throat. "No," he said. "It's procedural." And she violated it, repeatedly. Melissa whipped her head toward him, eyes blazing. "Sit down." Daniel didn't. He looked at the room and said, "She drafted revisions alone. There was no vote, no municipal submission. She misused board authority, and she escalated this to violence." The room went dead silent. Melissa's face shifted like her mask was cracking. "You're lying." I spoke again, voice calm, lethal. "Hospitals don't lie," I said. "Cameras don't lie, and neither does chemical spray in a patient's lungs." You could feel it then, that moment where power drains out of someone in real time. The board president, who'd been quiet the whole meeting, finally spoke, voice trembling with anger. "Melissa Hart, effective immediately, you are removed from your position." Melissa stood up so fast her chair screeched. "You can't do that. I'm the vice president." "Not anymore," the president said. And then the attorney, who looked like he wished he could disappear, added, "All fines issued under those revisions are void pending audit, and the Homeowners Association will be placed under temporary oversight for restructuring." Melissa's mouth opened, and nothing came out. For the first time since we moved into Pine Ridge Estate,